Welcome to Emma's Signature Dressing. Here's your host, Emma Williams.
Hi, and thank you for joining us. I'm here to share with you our traditional holiday dressing. My family expects this every Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I hope you enjoy it. I start by taking out a 12-ounce pack of crawfish tails from my freezer. I put those under a slow, cool stream of water in the kitchen sink and start them defrosting. Next, I start my oven preheated to 425 degrees, and I take my black iron skillet and I add a pat of butter and a pat of margarine, and I put this in the oven also to preheat my pan. Then I start my cornbread batter. I measure a half a cup of cornmeal, a half a cup of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of fresh baking powder, and a quarter of a teaspoon of kosher salt. I use a fork to sift all of those dry ingredients together. Then I take my measuring cup and measure a half a cup of milk, and I crack 1 egg into it, and I use my fork again to break up the egg and blend the milk, and then I microwave about 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of margarine to about a quarter of a cup. I like to mix the butter and the margarine and get the best of both worlds. You can do this recipe with all butter or all margarine. I find the butter's a little heavy by itself, so I like to mix to get the best of both worlds. So to my dry ingredients, I add my milk and egg mixture, and then I add my melted quarter cup of butter margarine. I stir everything together really well, and then I use a very dry hot mitt, and I take my hot pan out of the oven, and I put my batter in to the butter, the browned butter. Hopefully it's a little bit brown, so it gives it a nice golden crust at the bottom, at the end. And then once the batter's in the pan, I put that back in the oven for about 15 minutes. As soon as you can smell the cornbread, it's usually ready. And you can always do the toothpick in the middle. When it comes out clean, that means it's done. So the second half of the dressing, these are the vegetables that I use. Medium to large onion. You can use a white or a yellow onion, or best for this dish. A small to medium green bell pepper. 1 stalk of celery. And then I don't use all this garlic. I use 1 fat clove, or if the garlic cloves are really small, I'll use 2. And then some green onions. You can also add a little parsley. Where the baking part of the recipe is very exacting and you want everything measured perfectly, is not so with the vegetables. If you just cannot go to the store again and you forgot the celery, you don't have to use it, just omit it. If you don't want to use the fresh garlic, you can use dry garlic or the little jars in the refrigerator pre-chopped. You want to cut all of your vegetables up sort of small to medium pieces. Once everything is chopped up, you're going to take a medium saucepan with a little bit of room in it, and I use a half a stick of butter and a half a stick of margarine. I put all of my chopped vegetables in and saute that about 10 to 20 minutes until it's all wilted and you can see through the onions. And then I add a tablespoon of flour, and again, it can be level, or I usually put it a little bit heaping because I like a really thickish dressing. And then when we come back, I'll show you the crawfish part where you add that to it. Enjoy our commercial. Welcome back, and thanks again for joining us. We are at the browning part of the dressing. We've added a tablespoon of all-purpose flour to our sautéed vegetables, and now we're going to brown this. The more patience you use at this stage of the dressing, the better the flavor is at the end. This is about the time I usually maybe pour a glass, find a kid, get some company in the kitchen, and you just keep stirring anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes until you've got some color in your vegetables and your flour is nicely browned. This is probably the most important part, and it does take a little patience. This isn't a really fast recipe. We usually enjoy spending some what I call face time when we're doing this part. Then once we have that all browned, that's your basic ready to add the crawfish. I take the crawfish out from under the sink and cut the top. Some of it may still be frozen, and that's not a big deal. I add it into the flour and vegetables, and then I'll just put like 1/8 of a cup of water in the bag and swish out the rest of the crawfish inside the bag and put that into my pan. And then I'll break my crawfish up. If they're really a lot of frozen, I'll put my lid on my pan and just keep breaking them up. All of this sauteing and browning is done on a medium heat. Everybody's stove is a little different, so the times will vary. I'll just keep breaking up my crawfish until all of my tails are separated, and then I will season. I add 1/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt, 1/4 of a teaspoon of red cayenne pepper, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. And occasionally, you know, it'll be like a little heaping quarter to make it a little spicier. It just depends on who we're feeding. Then once I have my crawfish tails all broken up and seasoned, I put the lid on and I turn it down to low until it bubbles and simmers. About 10 minutes is usually what I watch the clock. You want it to simmer well. The crawfish will also add more liquid into it. About 5 minutes of bubbling and simmering, I will take the top off and then stir it occasionally and let the rest of that moisture sort of go out of it, because we like our dressing fairly thick, so you don't want too much water in it. And let it finish about 5 more minutes till all the flavors are really mingled and you can smell the crawfish cooking. And then I will take my cornbread, which I have some here already made and cooled, and then I'll turn it out on a cutting board, and I'll cut this into bite-sized pieces. You don't want to cut it too small, but basically it's all that buttery crust there, and I'll just cut it into a checkerboard until it's ready to blend with my dressing, until it's all nice and broken up. And pieces about medium size. And then as soon as my fish finishes simmering for 10 minutes, it's ready to add the cornbread. So this is basically how I cut it up. And it smells really good, and it's got that buttery golden crust on it. And then I will turn my fire off and put my dressing together with all of the cornbread into the étouffée and blend it up, and you have crawfish étouffée dressing. And this is what it looks like when it's all done. Maybe we can get a member of the crew to sample it, give it a taste, and see how it is. Put a lot of crawfish in it too, so it tastes really good. There you go. Let's see what you think. Good? Bon? And that's our crawfish étouffée dressing. You can chop vegetables ahead of time. I buy my crawfish when it's on sale, so I keep a stash in the freezer. And we're always ready to make this any holiday and Sunday dinners. This is from Studio 274 and our house to yours. Happy holidays, and I hope you enjoy it.